Back in February of 2018, the New York Rangers officially decided to commit to a rebuild where they ended up sending out a letter to us fans kind of explaining that they were officially going to kind of decide to go into a full rebuild mode, ship some pretty big name players kind of off. Obviously, guys like, Ryan McDonough, JT Miller, for example, which was a pretty key trade. Unfortunately, not for the Rangers, but obviously, that ended up being a big kind of move there at the time. We ended up seeing, a guy like Derek Stepan also get moved. There were some other moves as well. Rick Nash around that time period, he also got traded away. So there were, quite a few moves that obviously ended up happening where the Rangers wanted to kind of enter that rebuild there. We saw some key guys shipped off, and, we have had some decent success so far since entering that rebuild, obviously, and kind of coming out of it with, making 2 Eastern Conference Finals appearances in the last 3 seasons. But obviously, right now, the spot that this team is in, this season is not too great at all. Are we terribly far back of a playoff spot? No, but obviously we've been playing some awful hockey as of late. It is really disappointing to say, but we have been absolutely terrible over the last, 2.5 weeks, whatever it's been. So far, it has been absolutely horrendous hockey that we've seen, the last few weeks or so. So in today's video, I wanted to kind of talk about whether or not the Rangers could possibly look to potentially fire their general manager, Chris Drury. Now, I think if a move is going to happen where Chris does end up getting fired, that it's not going to happen mid-season. I would guess that this organization would wait until, this offseason to kind of figure things out there and make their final decision on whether or not they wanted to do that. But I think it really needs to be kind of talked about and kind of, thought about, because with the way this team's kind of gone on the last few years, we have obviously had some great playoff success, but the main kind of component for that success has been the goaltender, Igor Shesterkin. He has really carried us along, especially in those 2 long playoff runs, the conference finals appearance against Tampa and against the Florida Panthers there. Igor was, I would say, the clear MVP of our squad there, really kind of carrying us at moments on, some great runs there, multiple great runs to 2 Eastern Conference Finals over the last 3 seasons. That is not an easy thing to do, but the reason why we got there, the main one, is Igor Shesterkin. So it's not like, obviously, we have a guy who, Chris Drury kind of, specifically picked this goaltender to be our guy at least, and he ended up blossoming into a superstar. Igor was drafted way before, obviously, Chris Drury ended up taking over full-time as, the full general manager. Obviously, Jeff Gorton was around a lot longer before a guy like Chris Drury was, whereas Chris Drury was his assistant for a bit there. Now Jeff is obviously in management and running the stuff over there in Montreal. But either way, I think this is kind of said here that, Chris Drury hasn't really made this his team necessarily. I think there's a lot of players, obviously, that are still, Jeff Gorton's kind of guys there. And there are some players that, Chris obviously made the moves for to go up there and sign. And, the Vincent Trocheck deal, for example, that's a phenomenal one. Obviously, there are some other guys who have been kind of drafted and, picked up and trades free agency since he's kind of got here. But the main kind of core guys and the kind of top performer in the playoffs for us being Igor, who's been that MVP kind of guy for us in the playoffs, obviously he's not necessarily Chris Drury's kind of guy. He didn't, get him onto this team. So I think with the moves that we've seen from Chris, there have been some decent ones, but there also have been some not great ones at all. There have been some really bad ones, and we also have seen him quite a bit kind of try and go all in at these trade deadlines and consistently give away, high-tier, high-value assets, whether it is, draft picks and or prospects, going out there getting guys like, Patrick Kane, Tarasenko, Alex Wenberg, even Roslovic, he costed a decent little bit there. Chad Ruedel wasn't terribly cheap. So there have been a lot of moves that we see in Frank Vatrano as well. A lot of moves that, some of them I'm more than okay with. That Frank Vatrano deal, that ended up working out phenomenally. He was a great contributor for us, and we only had to give away, a 5th-round pick, a mid-round pick, I believe it was, something like that. So, it wasn't too much. But there have also been some not great trades as well where, I believe it was like a 4th-round pick we gave up for Chad Ruedel. That's not the greatest value. We obviously gave up, a 2nd and I think it was like a 5th for, Alex Wenberg there. Obviously, he didn't quite, panning out to the fullest ability there for us. He didn't play great. So there have been some good ones. There have been some bad ones. But in general, there have been a lot of, just kind of times of deadline there where he's trading a lot of high-tier assets away. And, they're just rentals where they end up walking away for nothing. So we basically, not necessarily just kind of gave them away for nothing, but, we acquired them for a small chunk of the regular season there, and then the playoff run where, for the most part, some of these guys haven't been, the greatest kind of impactful players, especially, guys like Patrick Kane. He didn't have the greatest impact there. Wenberg didn't. Tarasenko did solid in that first round series against the Devils there. He wasn't too bad, but, he still didn't have the biggest impact in the world. So there have been a lot of questionable moves by Chris Drury, and some of them I think have been good. Some have been very bad. I don't love all the rental moves that we make at the deadline. I would much rather see, in the offseason, try and go after one of those kind of starter-level kind of guys, whereas, yes, it might cost a little more, but you're still obviously having him for that entire full regular season there to kind of acclimate to the squad, get chemistry, find his line mates, get a spot in the city wherever he wants to live, and, kind of get fully acclimated to the New York City lifestyle and organization and stuff like that for the Rangers, whereas you're picking up guys at deadline there. They're still quite expensive. I mean, we're still getting up high-tier assets. They're coming in. They're not fully having enough time maybe at some moments for certain players to get acclimated to the team there, get that chemistry in the locker room and stuff like that. So I really don't love a lot of the moves that he has made at the deadline, especially. I think some of the rental moves have not been great. And, this is a guy who I think has, like I said, made some good moves. Yes, absolutely. But there probably has been more that have been kind of on the edge of leaning towards kind of bad moves and not great moves than there have been kind of, home run swings there. So that's kind of the problem there. We haven't seen a ton of phenomenal moves from him. I mean, yes, that Trocheck contract looks great there, although he has taken a bit of a step back so far this season. He still looks like a great player there. So there have been some really good players come up under Chris Drury, but there also have been a lot of players who have been these kind of key contributors to this kind of core group here who have, taken us on these playoff runs, who aren't really his guys. So what I'm trying to say here is I don't think Chris Drury has necessarily over the last, few years since he's kind of, taken over as the full-time general manager, really kind of earned his job to keep it. I don't necessarily think that. Maybe I'm being a little too harsh on him, and maybe I should be spreading around the blame to other people as well. But, in my opinion, I wouldn't really blame most of the kind of issues that we've had, on a guy like Gerard Gallant, for example, or Peter Laviolette. I think more of the blame should be on Chris Drury there. So that's kind of what I'm trying to say in this video is that, as of right now, especially if things kind of go on the pace that they are, or, chances are we're probably going to turn things around at least a little bit there and not be this kind of bad, because that would be pretty insane. So assuming we do make playoffs, which I'm still guessing we're going to make playoffs. Now the question is, how far do we go? And I think that, probably should have a bit of an impact on whether or not Drury is back with this team. Would I love to see this team obviously go on and have some great success there and Drury stays on? Absolutely. But with the way things are looking, with the way this team is built, relying on our goaltender way too much, and obviously not having the greatest kind of toughness on this squad here. We know the physicality and toughness and grit and all that kind of stuff is not ideal on this team. We definitely have quite a few issues on the back end, especially. The forward side of things there, we're not looking too bad, but we definitely have our flaws. So I think in general, unless we go on some really great run and we see at least, the second or third round in this year's playoffs, I really personally just don't see why Chris Drury should be back in management, with this organization. I think maybe he should be let go. Obviously, I was a great Ranger in his time there, had a great NHL career, a very respected guy, obviously. But at this point here, we need to see results, and we have gone on some playoff runs, like I said, but I think most of that is because of what Igor Shesterkin has done, not necessarily all because of what, Chris Drury has done and the guys he's brought in and drafted. Most of the players even are from kind of Jeff Gorton's time for the most part there. I mean, obviously there are some other guys who have come in recently, who have made a great impact on this team, who have come under Chris Drury, but a lot of the core players have come under Jeff Gorton there, and, the main guy being Igor Shesterkin, who's kind of carried us along there and really kind of dragged us out of some holes there where we're getting outshot by a crazy amount and all that kind of stuff there. He's the main reason why we've kind of gone on these great playoff runs. So personally, I would probably look to move on from Chris Drury this upcoming offseason unless we do see some massive kind of changes and some really big kind of changes as organizations kind of look and kind of play style, and just not only play style, but mainly just this kind of roster with the way it's built here. We need to see some massive changes here, and I'm not quite sure we're going to see it from Chris Drury. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we do see, a big move happening before the deadline, and he's looking to make some big moves happen this offseason, but I'm not quite 100% sold on him having his job for the 2025-2026 season, so I definitely do think it is a possibility and should be a possibility that we do see a new general manager hired to take Chris Drury's job this upcoming offseason. Anyways, I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed, definitely hit that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content. If you are a New York Rangers fan, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. It helps out the channel a ton. I would really appreciate it. It helps us share the videos out when you like and subscribe and comment to other New York Rangers fans as well. So definitely do that. Helps it a lot. I would really appreciate it. And I also love hearing your thoughts and opinions. So definitely comment down below your thoughts. Do you want to see Chris Drury back with this team no matter what? Do you think he deserves a little longer leash there? Or are you kind of on the same side that I am, where I think Chris Drury might be gone this coming offseason if we don't see some big things change. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll catch you next one, and let's go Rangers. Hopefully, we turn it around very soon.